Hey guys, welcome back to more homeowner association stories. In this video, a dead HOA demanded payments from me after 30 years of inactivity. They threatened me with a lien and then tried to steal my house. Here is what happened. The title story starts like this. My parents have lived in the same neighborhood in Florida since 1984. According to them, when they bought the house, they were informed that there was an HOA, but they were not required to join unless they wanted to use the amenities in the neighborhood. They actually never used them, so they never joined. In 33 years, my parents never got any kind of notice for fees due or any kind of fine from the HOA, so they were in the clear as far as they knew. Granted, this could be a misunderstanding on my parents' part, but I highly doubt that. I had some friends growing up in the neighborhood, and while their parents moved out long ago, they were not part of the HOA either. One of them absolutely hated them and specifically chose to move into that neighborhood because she did not have to join an HOA. However, my parents suddenly got a collection letter in the mail last week demanding they owe back dues of over $500 or else they will place a lien on the house. They means the HOA will place a lien on the house of the parents. So sometime yesterday, my dad called up the collection agency and they informed him that the HOA was getting better organized. So they are starting to collect fees from residents who have not been paying. And yeah guys, 33 years of getting better organized to then scam people, that is an epic timeline. Anyway, according to my dad, they were not able to tell him why HOA membership was suddenly mandatory. No surprise, I guess, since it was just a collection agency, somehow the call ended in a shouting match. The collection agency told my dad someone from the HOA would call him. My dad told me about this a few hours ago, and he and my mom are both retired and rely on Social Security for their income. They barely have enough for food and basic living expenses, they cannot afford to pay off this collection bill and definitely cannot afford HOA fees. I already paid their property taxes every year, along with helping them out with electricity, insurance, internet, etc. They didn't ask me, but I could help them pay this collection bill if necessary. However, this whole situation seems really fishy to me. Even if membership was compulsory, my parents just misunderstood why they bought the house, and honestly, why is the HOA suddenly demanding money after 33 years? Unless they are the most wildly disorganized group of morons that ever existed, I highly doubt that they just forgot about my parents' property for 3 decades, especially if they could make money off of them. Another weird thing is that the back dues are only $500. I don't know how much HOA memberships usually cost, but research on the internet tells me they can range from $100 to $700 a month. So at most, they are only charging 5 months worth of back fees. And by the way, Ripestories, funny side fact here, as you might know because I've said this in the past, whether you own a condo in Thailand or a house in a gated community, there's also something like HOA fees, and sometimes for some of these places, the HOA fees are absolutely outrageous. We recently looked at a condo here in the south, not because we want to buy it, because it's way too expensive for me, but just because we were curious how the construction materials and everything are on these kinds of units. And I think the unit itself costs around $300,000 or $400,000, it's fairly close to the beach. However, the monthly HOA fees are almost $500, which is absolutely crazy for a condominium complex. If you are in an HOA, how much are you paying per month in America? I'm really curious. So 5 months out of 33 years, really? Perhaps that means membership was only compulsory starting 5 months back, but wouldn't my parents have to sign some kind of consent form before they are allowed to start charging fees? Or at least get a phone call or something, someone going door to door? According to my parents, they did not receive any notice that they had to join, nor did they get any kind of bill from the HOA themselves. It apparently just went straight to collections. Like I mentioned earlier, I could pay this off for them, but I would like some advice first. I'm afraid that if I do pay the collection bill, it would be like my parents admitting that they knew they owed money the whole time. If that's the case, what is to stop the HOA from charging 33 years worth of fees? I tried looking for the HOA contact info, but all I found was an out-of-date website with a bunch of broken links. No phone numbers, no address, not even the names of the board members. There was no contact info for the HOA on the collection letter either, but as I wrote earlier, someone from the HOA might be contacting my dad. I don't know when that is, since with Irma on the way, they obviously have more important things to worry about in the next few weeks. I would also like to talk to them myself, since I would be the one potentially paying them. And I think Irma was like a big hurricane or something, but I think that was a while ago, so definitely this is an older story. Anyway, also as evidenced by my dad getting into a shouting match with the collection agency, I don't think he is the best one to deal with this. I appreciate any advice on how to deal with this, and thank you. And thankfully, we got an update to the story that goes like this. So we got distracted with repairs and getting things back in order after Hurricane Irma, so we kind of forgot about the HOA business for a bit. I also did not hear anything about it from my parents for a while. So after everything started to settle down, my dad and I went to the clerk of courts and got a copy of the deed. As we suspected, it indicated that my parents opted out of joining the HOA and waived the right to access certain lots. Around that time, my parents received a second collection letter informing them that the amount they owed was now over $1,000 and that they had 20 days to resolve it. I then contacted a real estate lawyer near my parents. It turned out that she was very familiar with their neighborhood and knew the HOA had voluntary membership. This was not an official consultation, I just gave her a quick summary of what was going on, so she did not actually see the deed or any of the collection letters, but she was willing to assist. I was going to talk to my parents to see if they wanted to set up a consultation with her, but it turned out they actually contacted and consulted a lawyer on their own. I have not been too involved from that point, so the rest of this post is mostly secondhand info from my parents. The lawyer contacted the collection agency and HOA, and she sent an FDCP letter to both, which I think stands for Fair Debt Collection Letter, as well as another letter demanding documentation to prove my parents' obligation to pay those fees. My parents have not heard anything from the collection agency or HOA since those letters were sent until today. My grandma and a couple relatives are visiting, and they've been staying at my parents' house. Apparently, while my parents were out, someone came by with certified mail. My grandma, who does not speak English and did not understand what was going on, signed for the letter. When my parents returned, they discovered it was another bill from the HOA collection agency upping the amount to over $1,500 and informing them that the HOA is gonna foreclose the lien and collect that amount in 45 days. My parents saw the word foreclose and understandably freaked out. They called me up and started talking about just paying this and getting it over with because they are terrified of losing their house. Thankfully, in this case, they don't have that kind of money, and I'm not about to pay a cent before their lawyer looks into this. I calmed them down and talked to them into calling their lawyer tomorrow. I also made a copy of the bill and helped them send an email to their lawyer, so she will have it to look at when they call. Obviously, we're going to find out more tomorrow, but for now I have a few questions. I actually don't know exactly what it means to foreclose on a lien, but from what I found googling, it looks like the HOA can actually take ownership of a property. Is that right, or am I misunderstanding something? Also, not sure if the HOA/collection agency are just ignoring the lawyer or what. Can they keep sending my parents these bills after receiving the FDCP letter? And would there be any legal repercussions if my relatives refuse to sign for a certified letter? I'm a bit iffy about the fact that my grandma signed for one today, especially since she had no idea what it was. And now we got a final update to the story. So your advice really helped me and my parents navigate the situation with this rogue HOA. So thankfully we finally have a conclusion, and I'm happy to report it's a good one. After my grandma accidentally signed for that certified letter demanding $1,500 with threats of foreclosure, my parents immediately contacted their lawyer the next morning. I was on a conference call with them, and the lawyer assured us that while the HOA could technically foreclose on a lien, they would first need to prove my parents were actually obligated to pay these fees. She explained that in Florida, HOAs cannot just randomly decide to enforce rules against homeowners who were explicitly not members for decades. The lawyer sent another letter to both the collection agency and the HOA. We finally found out who they were, reiterating their demand for documentation showing my parents' obligation to pay these fees. She also pointed out that continuing to harass my parents after receiving the first FDCPA, Fair Debt Collection Practices Act letter, could result in legal action against them. A few days after this, my parents got a call from a man named Richard who identified himself as the new HOA president. He asked to meet with them to clear up this misunderstanding. I immediately flew down to Florida to be there for the meeting. I suggested we meet at a neutral location, like a coffee shop rather than at my parents' house, and Richard agreed. Well, when we arrived at the coffee shop, Richard was already waiting with another man who introduced himself as the HOA treasurer called Doug. Richard started by saying the HOA had been reorganizing their records and noticed my parents had not been paying their dues. I interrupted him right away. My parents opted out of the HOA when they purchased a home in 1984. We have the deed that proves it. Richard looked genuinely surprised. Well, I was not aware of that. Our records don't show any opt-outs. What records exactly? I asked. Because the collection letters jumped from nothing for 33 years to suddenly owing $500 and then $1,000 and now $1.5K. That seems suspicious, don't you think? Doug shifted uncomfortably in his seat. We've been having some issues with our record keeping and the previous board members did not keep things very organized, so you just decided to start billing everyone in the neighborhood? I asked. Richard cleared his throat. Not everyone, just the homes that were not in our system. My dad, who had been quiet up until now, finally spoke up. We've lived here for 33 years without a single bill or notice from this HOA, not even one. And now suddenly we are facing foreclosure? That does not make any sense. Richard looked surprised again. Foreclosure? Oh no, we wouldn't go that far. We just want to collect the dues that are owed. I pulled out the most recent letter. This letter specifically threatens to foreclose on the lien in 45 days if the amount is not paid. Richard took the letter and read it, his face turning red. This was not authorized by the board. The collection agency must have escalated things without our approval. At that point, I decided to lay out everything clearly. So here's what's gonna happen. My parents have a deed that explicitly states they opted out of the HOA. They have no obligation to pay these fees. The collection agency has been harassing them after receiving a cease and desist letter, which is a violation of the FDCPA. We are prepared to take legal action if this continues. Doug spoke up again. We don't want any legal trouble, we're just trying to get the neighborhood back in order. By threatening elderly residents with foreclosure? I asked. Richard had the decency to look embarrassed. That was never our intention. We will look into your parents' situation and get back to you. I shook my head. That's not good enough. We want written confirmation that my parents are not members of the HOA and have no obligation to pay these fees. We want all collection efforts to stop immediately. And we want an apology for the stress this has caused them. The meeting ended with Richard promising to look into it and get back to us within a week. On our way out, an older woman approached us in the parking lot. She introduced herself as Natasha, a neighbor from a few streets over who was dealing with the same issue. Apparently, she had overheard our conversation and wanted to know how we were handling it. We exchanged numbers and I told her about our lawyer. A week passed with no word from Richard. I had to go back home from work, but I called my parents every day to check in. Then, 2 weeks after our meeting, my mom called to tell me that they had received another certified letter. This time, they did not sign for it and left it at the post office. I immediately called the lawyer and filled her in on what was happening. She advised us to pick up the letter so we would know what we are dealing with, but not to respond to it directly. My dad retrieved the letter the next day and sure enough it was another demand for payment, this time for $2,000 with the additional costs attributed to administrative fees, aka HOA mafia fees. At this point, the lawyer suggested we file a formal complaint against both the HOA and the collection agency. She drafted a detailed complaint outlining the harassment, the lack of documentation supporting their claims, and the violation of the FDCPA. She also suggested we reach out to other homeowners in the neighborhood who might be experiencing similar issues. Through Natasha, we connected with 5 other homeowners who had also received these sudden demands for payment. None of them had been members of the HOA before, and all of them were older residents who had lived in the neighborhood for decades. It seemed clear that the HOA was targeting older homeowners who might not know their rights or have the energy to fight back. Our lawyer suggested we all meet to discuss our options. At the meeting, she explained that we could file individual complaints or consider a group action. Everyone agreed that a group approach would be more effective, so we all signed on. The lawyer sent a formal notice to the HOA board and the collection agency, informing them of our intent to take legal action if they did not resolve the issue within 30 days. She included copies of all our deeds showing that membership in the HOA was voluntary, not mandatory, and about a week after this notice was sent, I got a call from my mom. She was in tears, but not from stress, she was laughing. Apparently, a different man from the HOA board had come to their door practically begging them to tear up the collection letters. He explained that the board had been misled by a few overzealous members who thought they could increase the HOA's budget by forcing non-members to join. My parents told him that they were not making any decisions without me and their lawyer present. He left his card and asked them to call him to set up a meeting. I flew down again that weekend and we arranged to meet with this board member whose name was Abel at our lawyer's office. Abel, or Abel, I'm not really sure how you guys pronounce that, showed up looking nervous. He started by apologizing profusely for the misunderstanding. Our lawyer was not having it though. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a deliberate attempt to extort money from homeowners who were under no obligation to pay. Abel nodded. You are right, I won't deny it. Richard and Doug thought they could boost our finances by going after the older homes in the neighborhood. They figured most of you would not fight back or would just pay to avoid the hassle. That is elder abuse, I said, barely containing my anger. Abel nodded again. Several board members have resigned over this, including Richard and Doug. The rest of us want to make this right. Our lawyer leaned forward. And how exactly do you propose to do that? Abel handed her a folder. We've prepared formal acknowledgements that each of these homes are not subject to HOA fees. We've also instructed the collection agency to drop all collection efforts immediately. And we are prepared to offer a settlement to each homeowner for the distress caused. The settlement offer was $5,000 per household, which seemed low considering the months of stress and the threats of foreclosure. Our lawyer negotiated it up to $10,000, plus a signed agreement that the HOA would never attempt to collect fees from these homes in the future. But here is where it gets interesting. While this was happening, Natasha had been doing some digging into the HOA finances. She discovered that Richard and Doug had been misappropriating HOA funds for years. They had been using the money for personal expenses, including renovations to their own homes and several lavish business trips that were actually vacations. Natasha shared this information with us and the remaining board members. The board was horrified and immediately reported Richard and Doug to the authorities. It turned out their scheme to collect fees from non-members was a desperate attempt to replace the money they had stolen before anyone noticed. The settlement negotiations took another turn. The new board offered to increase the settlement to $15,000 per household if we would agree not to publicize what had happened. They were worried that if word got out about the financial mismanagement, it would be harder for them to collect legitimate dues from actual members and maintain the neighborhood amenities. After discussing it with our lawyer and the other affected homeowners, we countered with our own offer, $20,000 per household, a binding agreement that our homes would never be subject to HOA fees, and a complete restructuring of the HOA board with new bylaws to prevent something like this from happening again. To our surprise, they agreed. The settlement was paid out within a month, and the new HOA board implemented all the changes we requested. Richard and Doug are now facing criminal charges for embezzlement, and my parents used part of their settlement money to make some much-needed repairs to their home, and they set the rest aside for future expenses. They no longer have to worry about unexpected HOA fees or threats of foreclosure. As for me, I learned a valuable lesson about standing up to bullies, especially when they try to take advantage of vulnerable people like my parents. I'm proud that we didn't just give in and pay the fees even when the threats escalated. By fighting back, we not only protected my parents' home but also exposed a scheme that was targeting other elderly residents in the neighborhood. The most satisfying part though, every time I visit my parents now, I drive past Richard's house, which has a for sale sign in the front yard. It turns out he's moving out of state to avoid the stares and whispers of the neighbors who know what he tried to do. Justice is sweet sometimes, so if you ever find yourself in a similar situation, don't give in to intimidation, know your rights, get everything in writing, and don't be afraid to seek legal help. And if possible, band together with others who are facing the same issue. There's strength in numbers, and sometimes it takes a group to stand up to corrupt organizations, so I want to thank everyone again for all your advice and support. And before we end the video, we will read one last story from r/I don't work here lady. It is titled, Apparently I work at a salon now. So last time I went to a public salon, my stylist was running late, so I was just walking around browsing the photos as you do. A woman comes in and starts telling me how much I messed up her hair very loudly. I just kind of stood there and laughed a little, which, whoops, infuriated her. I was wearing all black, so I just wrote it off as a mistake and whatever. She storms over to the front desk and demands to see the owner to talk about my poor haircutting skills. The owner is deeply confused when she points to me, so she looks up who her stylist was in the appointment. I'm just chilling when the owner brings over the person that did her hair so they could help adjust it and get it right. I know I was wearing all black, but I don't know how she got us confused. Her stylist was a black woman, I'm not black, with black locks, I'm a redhead, no locks, and was about 5 inches taller than me. We made eye contact and both had to not start laughing while this woman was still ranting. And yeah guys, please subscribe to the channel if you enjoy my content, and I will see you again tomorrow. Thank you so much.